Absolutely, Meg. Thank you. Greetings from London. So it's a good afternoon. A little bit about me. Oh my gosh, it's been quite a journey. I probably simply put, related to the topic. At the age of 48, 42 years of closeted cross-dressing came to a point where I was on a business trip in the privacy of my hotel room, and I looked in the mirror and went, "Who is she? What's her name?" And that began for me a journey out of cross-dressing into a question of my identity at 48 years old. And I talk about that it took to the age of 48 to start learning the language to be able to speak about this. It took me till I was 50 years old. And at the height of my executive career as a C-suite executive, to actually come out and say those words. So that was where it was at. I was married at the time, two amazing children who are still part of my life. And unfortunately, that corporate role didn't quite go the way you would want. And so after 3 years, I ended up leaving the organization under a non-disclosure agreement. And it was at that point that I felt I did not want anyone else to ever have to experience what I did. And I began to pivot and develop the very early days of what I do today, which is the global work with almost 500 organizations in 30 different countries, where I've been able to bring various insights and actual help them with various components from either a consultative and educational or just a conversation like this where we can just simply help uplift everybody to be in a better place. So that's a very short version.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing so much of your journey with us. And that sounds like quite the journey. And congratulations to you, man. Please be proud of
Thank you.
yourself, please, because this is
Thank
not
you.
an easy thing, and a lot of people
Yeah.
don't make it this far. So
Yeah.
very proud and so happy to
Thank
have you
you.
with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
All right, so let's
Yeah.
talk. Obviously, we're going to be talking about psychological safety in the workplace. Can you give us a quick definition so that way we've got everybody on the same page
Mhm.
as for what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. So I define the idea of psychological safety as the intentional effort to create an inclusive culture within an organization where everyone experiences the feelings of safety, that they feel safe, and that they feel like they belong. And so that's very much, and it's really founded on the idea that a culture is founded on values. So the most important aspect here is the inclusive function as a value within that culture. But it really manifests inside organizations as the behaviors and the language that is used. So it's really those things that manifest is what actually creates those feelings.
I like this. I kind of like the chicken and the egg sort of
Yeah,
nature of it. Very cool.
yeah,
All right, so as we're kind of thinking in these terms, why do you
yeah.
think that this psychological safety is so important, especially for people who maybe have never felt that they didn't have this? What should they really understand?
Absolutely. Well, again, it's like much of the work I do, a lot of it comes from my own experience, and I clearly didn't feel safe. But, in my history, um, I actually learned to fight for women's rights before I learned to fight for trans rights because I was the national board leader for Women's March Canada um, when it was founded. I think I'm one of the very few trans women that has actually led a feminist organization at least at a national level. And it was in that experience when I reflected today and went, well, why is there so much kind of cisgender women versus trans women debate going on? The fact is, I actually have a preponderance to actually look at my feminist lens first and my gender diverse lens last. And so I looked at it from that lens and I said, well, maybe people don't feel safe in this conversation. And that got me to really dig into, well, what does this look like? Certainly the program that I deliver here in the UK, we talk about the laws that are on the books. We talk about case law that actually has altered the definition of that law because society and case law is much more up to date than the actual written laws. And then we went in to explore all the things you might imagine, talking about what is a privilege, what does allyship look like in this concept, talking about, for instance, the hierarchy of privilege and understanding that not everyone is equal, both within a socioeconomic status, but also taking that to an identity level status, meaning that a particular identity within the construct of this idea of privilege might actually have a socioeconomic barrier because of their identity, which is not just overcoming their identity, it's actually moving into a different socioeconomic. So, and we see that play out. And I have through all of my years of doing this work, but also all the years that I've spent in boards, both national and international, within the LGBTQ plus community, but also in the feminist side of things, and really trying to understand this. And I kind of brought the lens that women are the largest group of marginalized people on this planet. So if we can partner everyone together on common issues, that we can actually arrive to create great change for everyone. And so that was where I came from in doing this, and what kind of drove me to look at this as one aspect of the business that I deliver, in that it's about 9 different areas all intersect with the idea of gender diversity is the commonality. But there's so many different things. We could talk about privilege. We could talk about gender-based privilege. It used to be called men's privilege. Nobody wanted to talk about it. So I renamed it gender-based privilege. And then I had British Gas ask me to present it. So, you have fun things like that you learn along the way. But yeah, like there's so many topics that intersect with it. And obviously my identity as a woman and my identity as a trans person very much center a lot of the work that I do and how I see it. And I try and bring in as many other voices to amplify that. So that's what's brought me into this area and what drives me.
I mean, you've hit on like 87 of my favorite subjects to just rant on. So, I mean, we could talk for hours on this. But yeah, I mean, like you're absolutely right. Like when we think
Yeah.
about, there is this just huge divide it ends up being,
Yeah.
and it's so dumb between, like cisgender women and trans women. And it's like, no, it's so stupid. Women are women. We've got the experience. We all
Yeah.
need to stand together. This is what, you know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
don't get anywhere by saying, no, you don't get to sit at the table with us, right? Like, come on.
Yeah. Well, the fundamental element of feminism 4.0, since that was, where I learned, like feminism 4.0 is the current version of feminism today. And there's 2 core elements. One is inclusion, so that kind of matches with the psychology. The other is intersectionality.
There it is.
And, that brings in so many unique aspects, many that are not my own lived experience. So it's very difficult for me to talk about some of them, but it absolutely is where we need to be in seeing these views. And in fact, most of what happens, and I'll give you a very simple example to demonstrate, unfortunately, we know that from the statistics that 1 in 4 cisgender women are going to be harassed or, actually perhaps have an assault in their life. For trans women, it's 1 in 3. Not fundamental. It's worse. It's the same thing. It's the same situations. It's the same people. It's the same. It's not different. And so can we talk about why we shouldn't be harassed? Why we should not be assaulted? That's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, okay, let's kind of step into this area here. No, honestly, these are great conversations, and apologies, y'all, if you're coming into this at 9 a.m., but some of us have been raring to go and really excited to have these talks all day. So sorry. Okay, so let's kind of go down that road a little bit further. We mentioned some of the stats at the beginning. 7 out of 10 LGBTQ plus people experience that sexual harassment at work, and 50% of trans employees hide their identity due to fear of discrimination. And that can be real or imagined. It does not matter. Like the threat is there. So let's talk about some of the steps that businesses can take to create these safer spaces in the office, especially when it comes to trans team members.
Absolutely. 5 very simple things. Well, they're simple to say, they're difficult to do. One is very clear anti-discrimination policies. That's black and white. That needs to be done. That work has to be done. There has to be training and education. to have a checkbox that says, oh, trans, yeah, we trained on that, right? It's no, like you need to consistently, these things are changing. It's if somebody was in the finance industry, you don't go, yeah, we did compliance. No, you
We're
actually have
done.
to
Check that box.
yeah, you got to comply every year, and and the rules change, and so you need to so the same happens in the diversity space that we end
Mhm.
up doing this. Looking at facilities, having facilities that are accessible by all employees. Maybe they don't need to be segregated by gender. Maybe it's just kind of, a bunch of facilities, whether it's change rooms or bathrooms or whatever, to look at that. Having employee resource groups,
Mhm.
absolutely critical of creating support networks and safe spaces for people within your organization. And finally, promoting allyship, but also mentorship within organizations, because all marginalized employees need some form of mentorship or even sponsorship programs in order to actually uplift and give them an equitable place to enjoy success.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, this is something we talk about a lot. It's like when you're trying to, if you want to include, I won't say diverse voices, right? Like one person's
Yeah,
voice is not diverse. But if you are
yeah,
trying to include new voices, previously unheard, previously sidelined people,
yeah.
you need to make it safe for them to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are looking at the trans community, you're looking at a group where visibility can absolutely result in injury or death. It's seriously scary stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah, it makes a ton of sense that you really do need to be proactive about this to create that safe space. You can't just say, well, when someone shows up, then we'll create it. Like,
yeah,
no, that's not how these things work. You don't not have to have handicap parking places out front of your offices because you
yeah,
don't think any of your customers are handicapped. Like that's not how this works.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Mm,
let's we did have a really, really good question come in from the
okay.
audience, or sorry, comment, I should say.
Yeah,
Charmaine had chimed in saying we need to talk about VAWG. In the UK, we need to be more explicit when we talk about trans women and girls. I find that organizations only do so when they already have trans staff. And this is, a kind
yeah,
of what we're saying, right? Like if you're only being verbal and talking about this after someone has come to your org like this,
yeah.
that's not enough.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, it's like at the beginning, and you had stated it in the way that many of us state it. I still state it at times, right? You go, trans women and cisgender women, or you can just say, this issue affects all women, trans and cis, right? Which is saying we're together, we are inclusive of this. And, when we look at stakeholders within an organizational capacity, you're right. You may not maybe have any trans employees, which means do you not have a psychologically safe environment that somebody feels safe either A, coming out to you, because they're probably there. If you've got 100 employees or more, you have a trans employee somewhere in there. Second is that, what about your customers? You probably have trans customers, especially if you're a retail facing organization, you will definitely have trans. And your suppliers or shareholders may have aspects, perhaps someone in their family, and they want to see you, not only saying that you take diversity seriously, but 46% of those under 24, when looking at employers these days, are looking at not only are they talking the talk, are they walking the walk, which means almost half of the future workforce of every company is actually starting to benchmark and go, are you living and actually showing us that you are doing what you say you're doing, both environmentally, socially, um, to the issues that are front and center. And gender
Yeah.
is one of those that's front and center.
Yeah. I mean, it very
Yeah.
much harkens back to I feel like rainbow washing hit like
Yeah.
mainstream culture a couple of years ago, 3, 5, something like that. And so it
Hmm.
kind of feels like the same thing, right? Like people are they're
Yeah.
kind of litmus testing these orgs. We don't just want to see a company that, oh great, you diversified the stock images on your company page. Like,
Right.
no, that's not how this works. You
Yeah.
know, you're right. We are coming up against a generation of people that are like, hey, the
Hmm.
math's not mathing. So why isn't it mathing? Because you told me it was going to be mathing. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And that applies to things like International Women's Day coming up in March, right? Don't tout out some women in your company and go, we're doing these. How about closing the pay gap? How
Yeah,
about actually coming in with mentorship and sponsorship programs to show us that there's more than, on average, 23% representation of women in senior leadership and board level positions?
right.
Yeah, like that's action I'm willing to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
All right, so we talked at the beginning how,
yeah,
it took you a very long time to get to this point in your life because you didn't
yeah.
have the language or, or the vocabulary to really talk
Hmm.
about these issues that were facing you. What do you think is so important about that power of language when it comes to creating these safe spaces?
Um, I would love to help the audience understand, even though I'm the acceptance without understanding girl, I want to help understand because if I was in your organization and I said, hey, can we not use hi guys whenever we greet each other in the morning? And you go, well, it's just a colloquial phrase, right? It's everyday speak. It's not gendered. Yes, it is. And here's the problem. When someone, and it's not me in particular, I'm way over this, but I could be triggered potentially by the high guys because what it does is I don't know if you just outed me. And if the audience doesn't know, the outing meaning to disclose, in my case, my previous identity to someone that didn't know or doesn't know. And in that case, my psychological safety, my emotional safety, and my physical safety are all called into question. And I know you're going, Cynthia, you're going over the top. But
No,
remember,
you're
I
not.
said, can you accept that? Because you see, in 2019, there was 33 women who were Black and Hispanic backgrounds who were murdered, and their murderers got away with it because they used the transgender panic defense. And this is
Yeah.
not just in America. This is across Europe. This is in the UK. It is global. Australia still all have this case. And all it is, Judge, I'm sorry, we got into I didn't know. I panicked. I killed him. I won't do it again. Okay. And
Oh,
if we
my
think,
bad.
right now, if we think that's bad, in 2020, when we were all in lockdown, the number went up to 40.
Mhm.
So while I am not Black, I am not Hispanic, the fact that I know that many of my sisters have been killed simply by being their authentic self, that could be going through my head. And do you need to understand that level of detail? Or could you simply accept when somebody says, hey, could we use hi, folks, hi, everyone, hi, y'all, hi, team? Or how about just hi,
Mhm.
rather than somehow putting a gendered response to it?
Yeah.
That's the power of language.
It really is. I mean, I like to, you're not overreacting, right? So let's just like make that high key
Yeah.
clear for everyone here, right? That's it's not an overreaction because you're bringing your own lived experience to the table. But, it really is something that the conversations need to be had. And if let's look at it this way. If you don't think that language is important and someone walks up to you and they're like, "Hey sis, what's going on?" Your average cisgendered man is going to take offense to that. And that should show them the power of language. All right.
Yeah.
You are so offended at me calling you a 6'5" man named Butch cis. And this is a problem, but you don't think it's a
Yeah.
problem to just call everybody, hey guys, at the beginning of a meeting. Like, really, it's not. I agree with you. This should just be a
Yeah.
like, oh, it's polite, sweet, we'll do that. Like, you shouldn't
Yeah.
have to have a cellular understanding of this, but
Right.
absolutely, yeah. Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about what this was like maybe pre-pandemic and post.
Yeah.
There's a lot more offices now who have adopted remote or hybrid working
Hmm.
environments, hopefully for a long while. Um,
Hopefully.
but as we are trying
Yeah.
to create safe spaces and do it within a remote atmosphere, what
Yeah.
should companies really be thinking about?
Yeah. And so a lot of the stuff we had talked about before, how do organizations make it, those apply. But specifically when we talk about remote, um, you know, some people suggest, pronouns are very important when you're remote because you don't see the person.
Mhm,
You may not be on camera. So just because you hear a voice does not necessarily mean that's the person's identity that you perceive. So
mhm,
that helps. Obviously, respectful language is important, just like the way you started the session. We talked about it. Um, and I think it's also, important that organizations look at the accessible, benefits in healthcare of what they're providing. large companies like Starbucks have done this, that are certainly well known and respected. They have many other issues, but this part
Don't we
they got
all?
they got right. But it was really, there are great examples that can be followed on how to do this. But at the end of it, it just simply is what I talk about. It's acceptance without understanding, and it's accepting the human being of who they tell you they are without questioning. Because look, we're human beings, we're complex. And you know what? Most of us don't understand ourselves really well. So how could we even expect to understand another human being better than they know themselves? So just accept that who they are without understanding, but that allows you to have dialogue, not to agree, not to get them to think your way or you to think their way. It's just simply, can we create a safe space where we can have dialogue to gain understanding of each other's point of view?
Yeah.
Not to agree.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not an unfamiliar
Yeah,
reference to basically anybody here, but I just keep coming back to Ted Lasso, like the
yeah,
glory that is Jason Sudeikis. Be curious, not judgmental,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
That's it.
you can have questions. It's not a problem to be like, okay, but why?
Yeah,
When you're asking a question to seeking to understand, right, as
yeah,
opposed to seeking to question, right?
right.
It's not I don't believe that you actually need this thing, justify it to me why you need it. It's
Yeah,
no, okay, I don't understand this.
yeah,
Help me understand, you
right.
know? I like that. Okay, you have written about the need to be a values-driven organization. What do you think that some of those core values should be for companies? It can be kind of one of the
Yeah,
things they either struggle with or
yeah,
they just come up with like 1,000 values that are their values. So
yeah.
what do you think those values should be?
Yeah, I mean, that article came out of a bit of work that I revived 3 times in creating and now ultimately publishing my own corporate values to let people know what I stand for and where I come from, which sometimes explains the way that I see the world. And what I talk about is the idea, for instance, first is to be authentic, and that's a really loaded word, but I'll give you some of the actions that fit under that. To be loyal, to be courageous, to be trustworthy, to act transparently, no judgment, act with integrity. We believe in diversity. Like, that's about half of them of what it means to be authentic to me. And
Mhm.
so it's doing that work to understand that being authentic is a really important word. Um, but much to the same degree as I talk about being current. And I know it's an odd word. You don't think of it as a value, but being current means to find insight that others don't, to inspire people, to build knowledge. It means to me to be spiritual because that's another channel of current information. It means to be, to contemplate. How else do we get it? And to share the wisdom and to innovate. So those are just some example. And then care is one that comes from my corporate background. We had a really great corporate speak for what care meant, but care is exactly what it sounds like, to be kind and be social, give gratitude. I mean, one of the people that I worked with in my corporate days always had this saying. She even had like on her door, she says, "You can be anything in this world. Choose to be kind." And it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, okay, that's great. And so in that vein, that's what caring is about. All of those things: forgiving, be at peace, be fun loving, be generous, be courteous. So yeah, those are some of the values that I have spoken to and brought forward and mean something to me in the work that I do with my clients every day.
I like that. Honestly, the one that kind of rang the most or like sparked the most for me was current.
Okay.
Because it kind of goes back to what you were saying, right? Like you can't really sit on your laurels. You can't,
No.
you can't be like, all right, well, we did that one, great, I'm up to
Yeah.
speed, I don't ever have to learn anything ever again.
Yeah.
I think we're all well aware that we're in this age of continuing education, right? It's
Yeah.
not just, something that like doctors and lawyers have to do. It's something that we're all going to be doing through our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like this, very much like this.
Yeah.
Um, All right, in the last couple minutes we have, where can people contact you? Where can they learn more about your work? Where, what kind of support can they give?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the business is CAF Services. You can find the business listed under Instagram, TikTok, and even on X. And you can find me on LinkedIn, which is my preferred business networking. Love to have folks to connect and let me know that you are connecting because you saw us here on this event. And I would love to have you in my network and be able to share with you all of the great work that I'm doing in the world of gender diversity.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much, Cynthia. All right. In the last couple seconds we have here, we did get one question from Shagufta Hakim saying thank you for coming on Power to Fly. Are there any other orgs besides the Transgender Law Center that addresses inclusivity in the workplace? So, are there places that people can go to learn more about this? Are there any big name orgs besides the Transgender Law Center that they should be aware of?
Well, I think that, and certainly in America, and I'm not sure what part of the world they're in, but in America, there's a group called Centerlink, which is an organization of LGBTQ plus centers. And so if you go to the Centerlink website, you just put in your local location, zip code, and it will tell you the closest centers. You can see what programs they have, if there's other things that they can do to help you. Here in the UK, there's many that are known, certainly from the trans space. There's Trans in the City here in London. I am not part of the organization, but I highly respect what they're out there doing. And so they're working to, again, bring very specific trans only focused programming out to that. And really just looking at anybody that's in the space of, diversity and inclusion work. Most of us are covering some aspect. Most of us have a specialization of somewhere we can go deep. For me, that's in gender diversity, but many others may be covering disabilities, race, neurodivergent backgrounds, age, uh, religion, sexism. Yeah, I mean, I know so many amazing people that all have their areas of focus, and we all work to help organizations become better places.
Awesome. All right, Cynthia, we are out of time, but
Yeah,
I just want to say another huge thank you. It's
you're
been
welcome.
wonderful to get to know you this morning and get to learn from you. I sincerely hope we get to do this again soon.
Thank you.